What's going on, CDL fans? It's time to go through our updated power rankings after week 2. On screen is my week 1 power rankings. So this is what we're, going based off of for this week. We do see some teams definitely changing, especially in that bottom portion of the list on the right side of the screen. But now let's get into the updated rankings post week 2. We have a little bit of the big news down here at the bottom. Obviously, we still have 3 undefeated teams. Boston was able to sweep Toronto, LAT was able to sweep Boston, and LAG was able to sweep LAT. So a lot of big wins for some of these middle of the pack teams. And then Optic also looking really, really good. And I also didn't put it on here, but Minnesota Rockers still does not have a win on the season. And I think that's a great way to start off. They are still at number 12 for me after week 2. Honestly, just haven't really looked that good. Vivid has definitely been the one that's shown the most signs of life. But Awakening, who's typically a guy who's putting up 1.1, 1.2 KDs, I believe has one of the lowest KDs in the league right now. Just overall, they're not really clicking. And definitely one of the prime teams that we could see make a roster change before Major 1. Although I kind of feel like most of these teams should just stick it out and see if they can get anything going before making a change so early. Then at number 11, a team down 3 spots, I do have the Carolina Royal Ravens. Honestly, this team just doesn't look good. Gwyn has been their bright spot for sure. I think Clay has also looked pretty decent. But overall, I would definitely say, Godorex and Real are kind of getting worked so far in their matches. They had 2 tough matches this week, right? They got absolutely dominated by Toronto and then even more dominated by Optic Texas. So, hard week for them, but definitely reflected in the power rankings. Then at number 10, down 3 spots as well, we have the Las Vegas Legion, a team that I was high on coming into the year. I was actually really high on after week 1. I thought they looked good, but just overall, despite getting reverse swept by, obviously, Carolina in week 1, they're just not really looking good. They're throwing their matches. They're up so big in Search and Destroy, and then they somehow lose. Overall, this team, honestly, they don't look terrible. Purge is definitely really struggling in Respawn, which is definitely a tough point for them. But Nero and Attach, I think, are playing pretty good, and Standy is still doing his thing, so maybe they just need to keep working out the kinks, get better at Respawn. And I do actually still believe in this team more than some of the other teams down here at the bottom. Then coming in at number 9, I do have my LA Thieves up 1 spot from 10 last week. They swept Boston. It was a really, really good series. But then they got swept by LAG. So, it's kind of like they are up 1 spot, but I would pretty much still consider them right around, the same range. Obviously, only up 1, like I said, but they definitely looked good and looked really bad at the same time. But then talking about getting swept by LAG, we do have LA Gorillas up to number 8, 3 spots from last week. I think this might be the biggest jump we see this week. I'm pretty sure this is the biggest jump we'll see this week. The Gorillas, honestly, they looked really, really good in their one series where they swept the LA Thieves. Obviously, they had some tough series in week 1 going up against the Toronto Ultra and the Subliners. But going up against a team that's probably in the same tier as them, like the LA Thieves, and just sweeping them, just absolutely dominating them. Definitely deserving for LAG to jump up. And I think this is a sneaky team we might see creep into maybe even our top 6 as we get into Major 1. Now, coming in at number 7, I have the Boston Breach. Like I said, Boston got swept by LA Thieves, but they also swept the Toronto Ultra, which is probably the biggest shocker of the weekend. 3-0ing that Toronto Ultra team, especially when Boston was looking pretty bad, honestly, is super surprising. But they were really firing on all cylinders. Snoopy is playing lights out. Definitely number 1 Rookie of the Year candidate for me right now. Capital is making a lot of plays. He's been the real playmaker on the map. Priesta absolutely fried in that series, and Slasher is just doing Slasher things. Right now, this team is really exciting to watch when they are clicking, and I really hope that they can continue to play this well once we get back from this 3-week break for the holidays. Yeah, they're just super fun to watch, and I would love to see them continue to rise in the rankings. Now we get into our top 6, and at number 6, down 1 spot from last week, it is the Seattle Surge. Don't get me wrong, Seattle's still good. They had a tough week 2 matchups going up against Optic and FaZe. And against Optic and FaZe, they honestly didn't look too great. They definitely didn't look as strong as they looked in week 1. But that's going to happen when you play really good teams. But I still think Seattle are a top 6 team, and I think they're going to be contending for this top 6, top 5 team the entire season. Definitely a fun team to watch, and I'm excited to watch them as we come back from break as well. Then at number 5, up 1 spot, is the Miami Heretics, a team that maybe you could argue should be in the top 4. The only thing really holding them back from me in the power rankings is they haven't really beaten a top team. They've beaten Rocker, they've beaten Ravens, and they've beaten Legion, who are all the bottom 3 teams on my rankings. but they still look really, really good. Their entire team is playing good, and their slaying numbers are up there with some of the best right now in the league. So I can't put them anywhere other than 5. Maybe you could try to argue they should be 6 and Surge could be 5, but they are currently undefeated as well. So got to take that into consideration. They are definitely looking really, really good. Then we get into our top 4. We obviously know the top 4 teams. We'll see if any of them end up ever falling out of this top 4. It'll be interesting to see throughout the season. I'm sure we'll see some shifts. But at number 4, down 2 spots, I do have the Toronto Ultra. Honestly, getting swept by Boston is really just what took them down. It's definitely was not an expected sweep, and they just didn't look good in that series. Envoy had a 0.48 KD. You know, the entire team except for Insight went negative. Stats aren't everything, of course, but just watching the matches, it did not really look good at all for Ultra. And I had to dock them some spots for that. Now we get into our top 3, maybe a little bit controversial. I'll put all 3 up on screen, but I do actually have Optic up to number 2 and Subliners still at number 3. I know people are going to say, well, Subliners beat Optic, so how can you have Optic over them? For me personally, I just think Optic has looked more dominant, especially in week 2. They looked amazing, but Subliners nearly lost to LAG. Obviously, they beat or they swept a Las Vegas Legion team that is at number 10. Optic swept a Royal Ravens team that's at number 11, and also beat a Surge team that's at number 6. For me personally, I just think Optic has looked better despite having lost to Subliners. I think it's really close. If you have Subliners at 2 and Optic at 3, I think that's 100% correct. And that seems to be what the consensus for a lot of people are doing, especially what we talked about on the Around the CDL podcast, which you should definitely check out episode 3. It is up now on the channel. Yeah, these two could definitely be swapped, but I went Optic number 2, and then FaZe obviously is just staying number 1. I mean, it's FaZe. At the end of the day, these dudes are looking really, really good. They are 3-0, and I cannot wait for them to play Optic. I don't know when they play them. I know it's during these Major 1 qualifiers, but I'm definitely excited. I believe it's week 4. I'm definitely excited to see Optic play FaZe. But yeah, this is my week 2, post-week 2 power rankings. Let me know what you think. What do you agree with or disagree with the most on this list? I honestly think overall this list is pretty solid. I'd say the biggest thing is maybe people thinking NYSL should be 2 and Optic should be 3. But I think overall this looks pretty good, and we're only 2 weeks into the season. There's not a lot to go on, so I'm sure there's going to be discrepancies with maybe your rankings compared to mine. But if you want to see more CDL content like this, consider subbing. 98% of the people who watch my content are not subscribed. And yeah, I'm going to be pumping out a lot of CDL content in the future throughout the season, so definitely consider clicking that button. And with that being said, hopefully I'll see you all in the next video.